Benny Hill shot a scene in 1989 that would ruin everything. His show made a lot of people laugh for 34 years, but this sketch made everything different. Within 48 hours there were 2,147 complaints. Late last night, sponsors pulled out. Protests were held by feminists. Some of his biggest fans even turned away. The BBC said it was the end of laughter. What was different about this scene from all the others that had happened? Why did the bosses freak out and tell everyone to destroy every copy? No one thought the truth would be so upsetting. It wasn't a surprise that Benny Hill was funny. He was born with it. Henry Hill, his grandpa, was a circus clown in Southampton from 1890 to 1910. Henry wasn't any old clown. People knew him for pratfalls, which were those funny over-the-top falls and quiet mime acts that could make a crowd laugh out loud. But what made him stand out was how he got people to join in with the act. He would look people in the eye, make up lines on the spot, and include strangers in the show. It wasn't just skill. It turned into a family habit. Alfred Benny joined the circus when he was 16 years old and carried on the family tradition. It wasn't just a home for them. Their small apartment above a butcher shop was also a place where they could learn. This is where the Hill family's comedy roots grew even stronger, setting the stage for everything Benny would become. Every Sunday afternoon in that small apartment was noisy and crowded. Alfred would teach people how to be funny in the living room. Benny learned how to fall without hurting himself, how to match his facial reactions to jokes, and how to use everyday furniture as props when he was 8 years old. It was not just fun, it was work. Fred taught him routines and Benny copied everything he did. The right time was very important, and even the smell of meat from the butcher shop and the floorboards that creaked became a part of his fantasy. What began as a way for a father and son to spend time together turned into a full-on comedy lesson. Years later, when Benny changed roles in an instant or nailed a slapstick scene on TV, it was all because of those Sundays full of laughter, discipline, and trying things out and seeing what worked and what didn't. Funny things didn't shape him only though. In his teens, Benny worked with Hans Dairy in Eastleigh to help bring milk in the early morning darkness and cold. He drove a horse-drawn cart through streets that were empty, where he met strange people and saw strange things happen. After many years, he wrote a song about those feelings. Ernie is the West's fastest milkman. In 1971, it was #1 in the UK charts for 4 weeks and sold more than 400,000 copies. Some parts of Ernie were based on real people, like a bread delivery guy named Ted who Benny used to compete with. Then in 1942, everything changed. Benny had to join the British Army. He first worked as a mechanic and then as a searchlight user for the Royal Engineers. There was no stopping him, even when he was in uniform. He kept the men happy with songs, skits, and impressions. Those troupe shows were his first real stage. Their lessons taught him how to read people, change, and make anything funny. No matter how bad things got. Things changed for good in his life and in British entertainment after that. Shown up on a BBC entertainment show called Music Hall on March 23, 1949. It was one of his first times on TV, which was a very new medium at the time. It was hard for most comics to make TV work for them. But Benny saw how it could. He knew that speed, outfits, camera tricks, and big faces were important for TV. He had a style that was quick, silly, and sharp over the next few years, and he was on shows like Mud in Your Eye and Hi There. He would quickly switch between roles and talk to people at home through the fourth wall. He wasn't just a new comic by the early 1950s. For the TV age, he was someone who changed the rules of humor. In 1954, only 5 years after his first TV show, Benny was named Television Personality of the Year. Those were more than just pretty awards. It meant he had finally arrived. People in Britain loved him. He wasn't stuck in the past with his jokes. The idea was new, graphic, and fun. He wrote his own stories, tried out new roles all the time, and made fun of whatever was popular at the time. Plus, getting that award made way for something even bigger. The beginning of the 1955 Benny Hill Show. One man's experiment turned into one of the most famous and important comic shows in British history. Benny did the show, but he wasn't the only one. Hank McGee was a very important piece of the puzzle. McGee was born in 1928 and wanted to be a doctor at first. But after his father died, he became an actor instead. Before he joined the Benny Hill Show in 1969, he worked in theater and went to school at the Italia Conti Stage Academy. He played the quiet, well-spoken man surrounded by crazy people for more than 20 years. Without breaking down, McGee always kept a straight face, even when things went crazy. Then there was Jackie Wright, the short, bald man in Britain who got hit the most. She was born in Belfast in 1904, and was only 4 feet 11 inches tall. In the US, he first worked as a Cadillac bodybuilder. During the Great Depression, he went back to the UK and ended up in music hall. In the 1960s, Benny saw him and he quickly became a fan favorite. The team had a different feel when Bob Todd joined. He was born in Kent in 1922 and first studied to be a doctor. During the war, he joined the RAF and even tried farming. The big break he got came when he met Ray Galton and Alan Simpson in a pub. Bob could make his face droop and look confused, which made him great at playing police officers, generals, or judges who would mess up. He started working on the show in 1968 and finished it. He added something new as the show went on. The Hills Angels. In the 1980s, these were the women who started to show up dancing. The show became flashier, sexier, and more divisive because of them. Sue Bond and Anna Dawson, two dancers, became famous on their own. Their routines were perfectly planned out and wore funny, eye-catching clothes. Some people said the show made women look like objects, but many of the dancers later said they chose what they wore and how they acted. Benny's special way of casting people was what made it all work, though. Not a lot of fancy acting or speech interested him. He wanted people to be able to dance, pull faces, fall down, and move quickly. People who were good at timing or dancers often got his attention over trained actors. That's how he found stars like Bob Todd and Jackie Wright. Even the Angels were chosen based on how well they looked and moved on camera. Benny Hill changed British TV for good on January 15, 1955. His new show on BBC One wasn't rude or loud. The first few shows were actually pretty boring, but they were smart, funny, and new. Hill used a mix of silly slapstick, smart wordplay, and sly humor. Something you didn't see on TV very often back then was him making fun of leaders and people in power. Benny wrote the show as well as acting in it. He was in charge of the whole show after that. Audiences took note. They came back over and over. The show was a huge hit by the end of the first year. It wasn't long before the BBC's risky show became one of the most talked about in the country. The show kept getting bigger over the years. Then it was December 27, 1971. It was the Christmas special night, and something historic happened. More than 21.1 million people watched. That was more than a third of the people living in the UK. For one night, Benny Hill brought the whole country together in front of their TVs. There were crazy chase scenes, funny sound effects, and guest stars that made it all feel like a big deal. People of all ages laughed. It wasn't a coincidence either. In the 1970s, Benny Hill had the most viewers of any show. But that night before Christmas, that was the top. It showed that comedy doesn't have to make people disagree. It might bring them together, even when it's Christmas. The show moved from the BBC to Thames Television by 1969. Things really took off after that. Benny had more freedom and more money with the new setup. The sketches got more visual, the jokes got shorter, and the sets got a lot better. He made famous figures like Fred Scuttle and the Hills Angels, a group of sexy dancers who made the comedy more interesting. Over the next 20 years they made 58 one-hour shows. Every one of them felt like a short movie. Benny wasn't in a hurry. The show didn't have a set time. He checked each show many times to make sure it was perfect. He could do some of his best work when he was free. Soon everyone laughed, not just Britons. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, the Benny Hill Show was shown in 93 different countries. His sense of humor wasn't based on words. It was comedy, with funny faces and body gags. Things that made everyone laugh, no matter what language they spoke. There were $26 million in sales for Thames Television every year, just from outside of Britain. The show played late at night in the US and became a cult favorite. Australia, Japan, and Germany were among the places that bought the tapes. Some even said that Benny was better known outside of the US than in the US. The show reached so many people. British humor could go around the world thanks to this. Even though some reviewers didn't always believe in him, he started getting awards. He won a BAFTA for Best Writer in 1972. Then in 1980 and 1981, the show was nominated for an Emmy in the US. An award that doesn't happen very often for a British variety show. It won the Rose d'Or in 1984, which is one of Europe's most prestigious TV awards. What his fans had always known was finally seen. Benny Hill was a great comedian. His humor was sometimes called lowbrow, but the smartest people in the business couldn't deny his skill. Work was very hard behind the scenes. It took 6 whole days to film a 30-minute show. This show didn't end in a day or two like most do. Benny expected you to be perfect. They tried a joke again if the first one didn't work. A fake was made over if it wasn't right. Even though he pushed the team hard, the results were clear. Every joke, every fall and every silly face were planned out to the second. They were too tired to run after 5:30 p.m. without having to work extra hours. The group worked hard and on time to make sure it was done right. Benny had full creative power, which made it all possible. He was the one who wrote 95% of the sketches. He did more than act. He made the movies, edited them and sometimes even chose the music. He took a notepad with him and wrote jokes all over the place. He also didn't like hearing from other people. If someone asked him to make a change, he would politely say no. He stuck to what he saw in his mind. It was rare for British TV to have that much power, but it gave the show a style that no one else could copy. The Benny Hill Show was more than just a show. It showed what was going through one man's mind. Of course, all that work cost something. By 1989, it cost about $450,000 to make each show. Today that's more than $1.4 million. The money was used to build huge sets, buy outfits, shoot on location, and pay for those crazy chase scenes with lots of extras. Tim's TV didn't seem to mind at first. Over the years the show had brought in $100 million. But as numbers went down and costs kept going up, they stopped it. Even though 9.58 million people watched the last show, that's not nearly as many as the 21 million that watched the first season. The music came next. During the chase scenes, the fast and silly song Yakety Sax played. Boots Randolph and James Q. Spider Rich wrote it in 1963. It became the sound of the show after Benny used it in 1969. That catchy song in the background made the sped-up video, the silly outfits, and the running in circles look even worse. It was so well liked that ITV viewers chose it as the UK's best theme song in 2015. These days that music makes you think of people running around in a mess. It's been made fun of in movies, politics, and late-night theater. Even though Benny is gone, that song and the laughs it made us all still live on. But some people didn't like the show. In 1987, it all began with a strong message. The up-and-coming comic Ben Elton didn't just say bad things about the Benny Hill Show, he set it on fire. On stage and in writing, he said that Hill's entertainment encouraged men to hurt women. He said that because of the show's racist tone, women in Britain can't even walk alone in a park anymore. That really hurt. Over 21 million people still watched Hill in the 1970s, and many of them still loved his comic acts. Elton wouldn't give up though. After that he made fun of himself by playing Benny Elton on Harry Enfield and Chums, while women chased him to the tune of Yakety Sax. It was clear what he meant. It wasn't just funny to make people laugh. People's ways of life changed quickly because of it. After 2 years the show did something it couldn't take back. Hill showed a beauty pageant sketch in 1989. When you first looked at it, it seemed like his normal mix of sarcasm and pretty girls. The jokes were darker this time though. The women's talents included awkward strip teases and getting naked by mistake. The camera stayed put for too long, catching every moment that could be seen. What was once funny now felt sexy. The joke wasn't funny, it was scary. The audience and critics did not laugh. They hurt. It seemed more like mild voyeurism than a joke. By that time the feminist movement was really taking off, and Hill's writing seemed like it came from the 1950s. A lot of people complained. The network went crazy, but that was just the beginning. In the same year another picture made people even more angry. Hill checked out bikini-clad women in a clinic while pretending to be a doctor. What's the joke? There wasn't one. Long sexy shots of the women's bodies while Hill looked at them. Not a word. Not smart. Only a sexually arrogant figure, and women who are used as props. It wasn't just bad, it hurt my feelings. A lot of letters were sent to Thames Television from viewers. Too far out of step, The Guardian called the scene. As The Independent said, it was like going back to a time when women were supposed to laugh at their own shame. Protests and harsh op-eds were held by feminist groups. It was the kind of humor that one writer said we've been fighting against for 20 years. Then there was the moment that broke everything. There was no close-up, just a long slow-motion shot of a woman fixing her swimsuit while Hill looked at her. It wasn't a game, it was taking advantage of. In just 48 hours, 2,047 people had sent in complaints. That set a new record. People said it made them feel bad to watch TV with their families. Even people who supported Hill had a hard time explaining it away. The sketch wasn't just missing the point. It was very far from what the Times said. That one shot was the last straw for many. It was torn apart by the press. It was called exploitative vaudeville by the New York Times. The Guardian agreed with the anger and said the sketch was from a time that Britain had moved on from. Hill was once a comedy star, but now people who used to praise him were tearing him apart in public. Even critics who had been writing reviews for a long time agreed that the show had become old, useless, and out of touch. Both the media and the marketers stopped caring. Cadbury and Ford were among the sponsors who quit. They were scared by the protests and calls to boycott. No business wanted to be linked to a brand that made fun of women on national TV. Not only did it hurt their image, but it also cost them money. It costs $450,000, or about $1.4 million today, to make an episode of The Benny Hill Show. Without help from advertisers, that number couldn't last. Not very exciting, the show's end was just business. All of this happened because of a big change in culture. In the 1980s, the feminist movement was no longer a small group of protesters. It had become popular. Hill's sketches, especially the Hill's Angels parts where women in bikinis were chased around, looked silly now. Younger people had already moved on. French and Saunders and The Young Ones were two shows that had smarter and more edgier humor. Men chasing women to silly music used to feel like it was from a long time ago. This was made clear by a YouGov poll from 1988. 68% of British women under 40 said they thought Hill's show was old and rude. 44% of guys the same age agreed. For older watchers who still had good memories of Hill, that gap grew even bigger. The math showed it. People who watched Benny Hill were getting older and fewer. Young people didn't just hate the show, they turned it down. By 1989, even TV reviewers who had stood by Hill for years began to turn their backs on him. The Guardian told it like it was not in sync with the times. The Independent said that the joke was embarrassing. It didn't feel like a national gem anymore. It felt old and worn out, and relics get buried in the end, no matter how much people love them. In the morning of November 7, 1989, Benny Hill went to Thames Television's main office hoping to hear good news. He had just come back from a great show at the Cannes TV Festival and was ready to talk about new season ideas. The meeting didn't go the way he had hoped though. He was sitting next to John Howard Davies, who was the new head of Light Entertainment. Davies told Hill things he didn't want to hear. The show was called off, not a warning. Do not fall softly. For cold reasons only. In the 1970s, 21 million people watched, but now only 10 million do. The cost of making each show had gone up to $450,000, which is about $1.4 million today. And the jokes were seen as old-fashioned now. Hill, 65, was shocked. A new sketch had already been written by him. It didn't take long for the meeting to end. He left without telling the press anything. A man who had been a big part of British theatre for decades had been kicked off his own stage. It's not all bad news that the change was made. It came with a golden order to gag. Thames made Hill an offer of a $1 million severance deal. It sounded nice, but there were some rules attached. There was nothing bad he could say about the network. Not a word. Not about the heads of companies. It's not about the choice. Not even briefly. He also couldn't sign with another radio station for a while. It looked like a golden kiss but was really a soft muzzle. Even though Hill took the money, he was very sad behind closed doors. It's no longer funny, he told his friends. It felt like treason to a man who had been with Thames since 1969. He had to follow that rule of silence until the day he died. In 1992, he never had a chance to defend himself in public. What Thames did next made things even worse. They ordered the master tapes of his last season in 1989 to be destroyed without telling anyone. Gone. Deleted. Even information that might be seen as offensive, most networks would store it. Not this time though. CEOs wanted to break all ties. They were afraid of what would happen and wanted to hide the whole thing. Some fans and collectors kept bootleg copies though, and those rare tapes got even more valuable over time. The events that were never shown became a kind of urban legend, adding to the mystery and sadness of Hill's last book. The show kept showing in America even after it was taken off the air in Britain. People in the US still loved it. The silly jokes, the chase scenes, and the slapstick, everything still worked well. The show was shown all over the US until 1991. Made about $250,000 from those repeats alone. 54% of people who answered a TV Guide poll didn't want the show to be taken off the American screens. It was still making a lot of money in other countries, but Thames didn't care. Things were different at home. What people used to think was light-hearted fun is now called sex or out of date. It had never been clearer how different American and British values were. But there was more going on behind the scenes, and stories began to surface after the show finished. Some of the female cast members, mostly from the group called Hill's Angels, began to speak out. They said they felt like they were just there to be used as props or for cheap laughs. Hazel O'Connor, a punk singer, said Hill said rude things to her and even tried to kiss her. Some people, like actor Jane Leeves, said Hill was polite and helpful. The picture wasn't clear. Some women fought hard for him and called him a father figure. Some people said they felt like objects. Different kinds of stories were told, but they all added fuel to the fire. The show that used to be the best in British comedy was falling apart because of new ideals and hard truths. The job was done by the wave that came next. Different kind of comedy. In the 1980s, a new group of comics came on the scene. They made fun of the old guard. Some TV shows, like The Young Ones and Not the 9 O'Clock News, made fun of Benny Hill's acts. They said he was out of style. They said his jokes were racist. Ben Elton was one of the biggest people who said that Hill's work made it acceptable to treat women badly. It made him think of how scared women were when they walked alone at night. It was a strong charge. Hill was a target for the new wave because he stood for everything they wanted to destroy. Not as many people watched him, his name got into trouble, and the people who used to cheer for him now laughed at him. Hill didn't fight back after the show was picked up. He went away. He moved into a small flat in London and didn't leave it much. Friends said that the only times he went out were to get food or take a short trip to Europe. He stopped going to events in his field and answering his phone. Some people said he was sad. Some people said he gave up. He told a friend that a simple good job would have been nice. He got none after more than 20 years with Thames. There was only silence and a quiet escape. But there was something else going on in the background of that quiet. His health was getting worse. He had heart trouble and hurt his joints. He hid the fact that he was hurting. In 1992, he had a heart attack and was told that his kidneys were also failing. Surgery and dialysis were suggested by doctors. Hill said no to both. He did not want to be treated. He just wanted to be alone. Because of his arthritis, he had trouble moving around, and even his last TV performances had to be changed to accommodate his limited mobility. People never saw this side, though. Hill smiled on screen while she was crying behind closed doors. He had one more chance. A new show was planned for 1991. The world tour of Benny Hill. It was only possible to finish one show, Greetings from New York. It turned out to be his last show. A few more offers came in fact Central Independent Television sent him a contract in the beginning of 1992. Hill did not sign it though. He passed away the day it came. He had turned down offers from other networks as well, including the one that fired him. He might have stopped wanting the attention. Maybe he didn't believe in the business. He might have also known that things had changed. Benny Hill was discovered dead in his apartment on April 20, 1992. He was 68 years old. He had been sitting in his armchair and watching TV 2 days before. That's where he passed away. By yourself. It wasn't until neighbors complained about the smell that his body was found. Den Kirkland, his producer friend, climbed up on a ladder and looked out the window. Hill was there, envelopes and stacks of old videotapes all around him. Coronary thrombosis, a heart attack caused by a blood clot, was the cause of death. 2 days had passed since he died. A man who used to make a lot of people laugh, died quietly without being seen or remembered. That was the last joke's punchline, which he didn't mean to include.